Welcome, everyone. We are going to virtually file in. I am Gracie. I'm here to represent print tonight. Thank you, everyone, for virtually attending on this beautiful Friday night. A few little housekeeping details just before we get started. If you have any questions during the event, please feel free to enter them in the chat box, which is on the bottom right, or in the question and answer function, which is on the bottom bar of your screen. There are two ways to view this, depending on what you prefer. In the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, there is speaker view or gallery view that you can select. Gallery view will let you see everyone at once. Speaker view will just highlight the person reading. Entirely up to you, whether you want to get the panel feel or kind of the individual. If you'd like a copy of tonight's book, I'll include the link to the print page so that you can click right on through. We have plenty of copies and they're stunning. And now I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to Jeri to tell us a little bit more and get our reading started. Over to you, Jeri.
Well, thank you, Gracie. Thank you for hosting us. I wanted to say a little bit about how this book, how it started. And it started, I just, have this idea. There are anthologies out there about the pandemic, poetry, prose, all kinds of things written about the pandemic. And I thought that maybe Maine writers had a lot to say and maybe had already been writing. And so I contacted Agnes Bushell at Literal Books and said, hey, I've got this idea. Can we do this book? And I think she said yes within 24 hours. And that was in December. So this has been a very quick project and from start to finish. And I just am so grateful to Agnes and Jim Bushell and their wonderful designer, Lori Harley, for putting this book together and making it so beautiful. And I am mostly grateful to all of the contributors, the poets and the artists who trusted their work to me and us. And I think the results are very, very good. And maybe somebody is going to have a question about all of that at the end. What I would like to do is get started with the readings. And what will happen is each person, who I hope you know your order, each person will read their own poem that's in the anthology, and they've chosen one other poem by somebody else to share. Each speaker will also briefly introduce themselves, and we will go seamlessly from one reader to the next. And at the end, there will be time for questions. Okay, so the first reader is Wendy.
Thank you, Jeri. Yes, I'm Wendy Cannella. I live in York, Maine. I tend to spend a lot of time at the Jersey Shore with my extended family. So grateful to be a part of this fantastic book. I want to echo thanks to Agnes and Jim and Lori, and especially to Jeri Theriault, our editor extraordinaire. And thanks to you, Gracie, for hosting tonight. The first poem I'll read is my own, and I'll say this about it. It was born from a need to make sense out of some of the science that I was reading around the coronavirus, which sometimes named viral cells as offspring and other times as parentless. And that language opened up a kind of problem for me in terms of motherhood and daughterhood and self-destruction. Here's the poem. Sympathy for the virus. Don't call it a crown. Don't learn to love it. This catch in my throat, this witch. Dangerous, the news report says, to turn a virus into a metaphor. And yet, this starlet makes her entrance, not to be trusted. Queen of everything, ready to take hold of the world. I know your loneliness is cold and hard, flawless, set deep, encrusted, and how you must see things for yourself, touch every smoldering cell, find a place you belong. But you need to learn to be gentle. Don't rush things along. Don't turn your debut into a swan song. You must be the daughter of something, someone, holding on with your tender hooks, your tongues. The second poem that I've chosen to read is titled How You Dressed for the Pandemic by Kathleen Ellis. I don't know Kathleen or her great-grandmother who appears in the poem, but I really admire the way the poet situates the personal into a larger historical context. How You Dressed for the Pandemic, in memory of Lizzie Clough, 1846 to 1919, by Kathleen Ellis. Not everyone was thinking about how to dress for the Spanish flu. It didn't occur to you to choose between a gauze mask or a veil of fine mesh and chiffon. It wasn't the money. Myronn, my great-grandfather, tax collector of Alameda County, would have bought you anything, Lizzie. Outliving him, you survived the war at home, wearing black for your own dead. Now your choices were your own. Did you poke holes in the mask to smoke? There are no photos to prove otherwise. Or were you a member of the Anti-Mask League, or thinking of how to dress for the liberation? And after you died in the third wave in 1919, were your ashes strewn into the bay? Or are they in a niche with a flowery scene on a drawer at the columbarium? Here, stand in the light so I can dress you. Nothing to hide, nothing to fear. Come to claim what is ours, this mask I wear that has no memories but your absence. Thank you.
My name is Elizabeth Tibbetts. I don't know where I am. I don't see myself.
We can see you.
You can see me. Okay, great. I'm very grateful to be included in this book with these wonderful poets. And Jeri, thank you. It's really a beautiful book. The first poem I'm going to read is mine, and it's called Week After Week. And I don't think it really needs explanation. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I claim the red leather couch. 1950s, once gorgeous, now cracked, torn, and sagging. It sat in my grandfather's office along with a matching chair, a mahogany desk big enough to sleep on, a cut glass ashtray. A soft pack of Winston's tight in one pocket, the wire in his ear running to the hearing aid in the other. Always a suit and tie. Lulu jumps up and wedges between my feet or by my head, pressing her dog face against my human cheek. She breathes. Dr. Shah comes on at 2, week after week, nearly a year. His eyes tired, new glasses, hair a half-inch longer now. Even as numbers soar, the timbre of his voice settles me, ministry of science and comfort. Sometimes I fall asleep. He's so sensitive, Lulu says, and handsome. I'm sure it's she who's talking, though it started out otherwise. Numbers are more than numbers. They are people, he says. The stories that remain when someone dies. Tell me. Winston's killed my grandfather, heart, not Spanish flu. Born around 1900, give or take, dates gone in a fire. Millions have died. I can't see them. Lulu wiggles and sighs. I listen. Dr. Shah wears a white shirt and tie and kindness. He says, stay safe and take good care of one another. I'll bet his wife cuts his hair, loves him as she snips. And I have to say, I am so grateful to live in Maine for so many reasons. And the next poem I'm going to read is by Laura Bonazzoli, and I know her a little bit because we've taken some writing classes together. And I chose this for the sheer beauty of it. Meditation in Quarantine, May 2020. Open, a door, a letter, a box of old photographs, the buttons of your coat, your mouth. Call back that moment your lungs unlatched their filmy windows and first received the breath of grasses, stones, your grandfather singing in that photograph against the sky. Vulnerability does not always induce wounds. Wounds do not always bleed. Sometimes you open your hands to snow. Buds break from their woody nodes. A blackbird's slender throat opens the night.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Jeri, would you please tell me when I'm up? I seem to have misplaced my roster.
Yes, I will tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It was wonderful to hear those poems. My name is Samaa Abdurraqib. I live in Portland. Thank you, Jeri, for including me in the collection. And thank you to—
Nice to meet you, Samaa. I
Oh.
hadn't met you before, so nice to meet you, and thanks for being here.
Thank you to all the poets who are included in the collection. Let's see, other thing about myself, I'm getting my first vaccination shot next Tuesday, so I'm really excited about that. The first poem I'm going to read is my own. And this poem is called Trash Day, period, day 9. And I wrote it April 2nd last year, 9 days after, in Portland, I live in Portland, after we had our quarantine orders, our curfew, our quarantine orders. Trash Day, day 9. I walk outside to greet the wet and gray of this newly April morning. It is Thursday morning. It is trash day in my neighborhood. I've got 2 bags of my own. I imagine my neighbors emerging from day 8 of isolation, rapid blinking in the lessening evening light of the day before, trash bags in hand, some with gloves, some without, both regretting their choices. This morning, our sidewalks look like the morning after Christmas. Every curb piled high with bags of purple and white, bulging at the seams, some split, white bags overtaking purple. The rules have relaxed and we've settled on cheapness. At the end of my driveway, 5 trash bags lay in a tumble there, waiting for me to add my 2. Contents spilling out of the cheap white distended bags. Rats have torn a hole in one. Paper-plated remnants of the week before peek out. 7 bags total for us in this building of 4 apartments. On any other week, there'd be 4. We are no different from our neighbors. 1 week inside and our trash has multiplied and taken on a different heft. For a moment, I wonder if this is the trash from some other neighborhood added here on top of ours, clandestinely in the middle of the night. Returning inside, from my window, I watch the trash men come. They linger at each curb minutes longer now than any other week. The sheer volume of bags is extending their work time. On this week, 2 men lift our burgeoned trash, 1 bag at a time this week, with both hands. I know that this is all ours. This is what we have been inside creating. No inexplicable night mission to blame. This is what we do when we are forced to brick ourselves in. We multiply, we generate, we produce fetid waste, we sag into our excesses, we cheaply dispose, we rapid blink in the fading light. Thank you. The next poem I'm going to read is a poem by Jefferson and Vicki, who I think is here. I vaguely know Jefferson, just vaguely, but I love his poetry. And I love this particular poem because it makes me think of the Rats of Nim, first of all. And because it's both like haunting, and then there's some other like haunting, there are just some other layered images in the poem that I really, really enjoy. So this poem is called Rat Kings by Jefferson and Vicki. I was just learning to leisure, whole days furloughed like retirement's slow bloom when the rats crept in. Once brazen in their daytime snatches, I beat them back to night missions. Surgical in their precision, they got in anywhere. I hear their teeth are molds for some deep digging machines that can chew through stone, edge upon edge, so each bite multiplies its reach. Such efficiency of mouth I'd like to learn. Each word to cut itself letter by letter into some better articulation of grief, a sharper turn toward desire hard won. 1 in 20 rats can detect landmines, know enough not to set them off. No wonder my traps sit unsprung in the woodshed. Their bit of fat, not enough bait for the rest to risk the death they saw their king suffer. Carried out by the tail, big as a small dog, his face crushed by the kill bar. The king looked like he was sleeping with his hands tucked beneath his chin. At least death was a quick snap. Poison is possible in the future, but it climbs up the food chain. And to die from bleeding out, I'll keep as a last resort. For now, the rest of them, a few, dozens, hundreds, live like fat dwarves of yore beneath the mountain with their hoards of treasure piled up around them from nightly plunders, sleeping bodies nestled together like a fur version of the small intestine, waiting for a new king to rise, bare his teeth, don his crown. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katherine Hagopian Berry. I'm privileged enough to be next. Thank you, Jeri. Thank you, Agnes and Jim and Literal Books for the opportunity. Thank you, Samaa, for an amazing reading and for picking Rat Kings, which I was so torn and almost chose. I love how that poem made me love rats, which I do not love. For my part, I was fortunate enough to be joined in this anthology with so many poets who I am crazy fans of, and especially the poet Megan Sterling from Portland, Maine. I'm from Bridgeton. Megan and I have been poetry sisters since Balancing Act 2, and I was delighted to find out that we were very close together in this anthology, and I was doubly delighted when I encountered her poem because it immediately struck such a strong and resonant core in me. Both Megan and I are Jewish, sort of. Megan probably more than me. I'm a kind of a scrambled mess. But we have that same cultural heritage, and it expresses itself in weird ways sometimes, like incredibly clean houses. And so when I came to her poem, OCD is now good hygiene, I was torn between simultaneously laughing and crying the whole way through because I got it so deeply. And what I loved most about it is in a poem coming from a shared cultural touchstone, it actually reached out into other faiths, as I found my own poem in this anthology to do. And so I wanted to read them one right after another. My poem, Eulog, happened because my daughter wanted a maypole for her pandemic birthday party, and my husband and I were stuck with a maypole wondering what to do with it. The answer is you chop it up into a Yule log. So I thought we would go from a celebration of early pandemic OCD is now good hygiene to my husband and I unfortunately realizing we were going to be burning that Yule log still in the pandemic. And I wanted to let the poems sort of speak for themselves from here on out. So first, Megan Sterling, OCD is now good hygiene. A sudden desire to clean the mirrors, anything glass, anything reflective, as though the me that I glimpse as I pace, furrow, busy myself in the silence could survive this better for a purer silver shine. How I try to keep this house clean, to keep this bug from landing and making itself at home, every day watching my daughter, waiting to see if symptoms will come. Was the doorknob sprayed? Has she washed her hands? And what if I didn't act quickly enough to wipe down faucets, handles, shit? If I forget even a sliver of shadowy corner, my whole family depends on this diligence. My anxious childhood rising before my eyes righteously, this whole sickness like a judgment. What kind of mother would I be to allow this thing in my house? What kind of woman? I want to fight it off with my gloved hands, curse it behind my mask, slap it raw, toss it to the curb with the bad men and old fears that have dogged me into my adulthood. The house is haunted with the possibility of germs. My knees bruise, my hands bleed. I dream I kneel before a statue of St. Francis. But while he preaches, I fixate on how soiled his stone feet are. And mine is from a little later in the pandemic, Yule log. From the maypole, from the springtime, wrapped with rainbow ribbon, we thought this would all be over soon. Half a year later, hook your favorite mask. Take the only journey possible to the log pile and back up a frozen hillside home. Watch the snow moon overtake sunset like a planet we could reach with only our longing to launch us, stars and pilot stars, even downtown, even West Coast, light year distant. Inside, so old tradition goes, we play cards by fire glow, longing transformed to light, relaxing, I suppose, from yearning. I am always forgetting to cherish, until I notice some residue joy, wine you pour, rubies in the cut glass, we relearn the habits of endurance, side by side, your hands, diamonds, until we win. Find courage to open our new calendars waiting like a ribbon in the log pile, under the green tarp, under the snow. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
It is a pleasure to celebrate this book with all of you today. My name is Myron Hardy, and I live in Portland. Jimmy Cobb was the drummer on Miles Davis's album Kind of Blue, and he passed in May of 2020. This poem is called For Jimmy Cobb. What kind now? What pulse is made in this blue without the strike to symbol? The sea where white boats bob, where inner tubes sink, no one is rescued. I play that album in my apartment with the windows wide. Air in, out. A blue-haired girl skateboards down Bartlett Street. She hears your cymbal first, then the other beats, sounds. Blueness, blooming, bluer. She can't rest at night. No rest at night. No rest in Lewiston, New York City. No rest. Unrest now. All right. And so I chose this next poem because it speaks to, I guess, a kind of wreckage that can happen when one is made to be sort of continuously still. So this is Another 4 Weeks Quarantine by Craig Sipe, April 2020. She'd broken out the old Prozac from 2015 because she doesn't believe in expiration dates. Depression can be a tricky thing, when to endure the down or when to swallow it down. Expiration dates mean nothing because predilections do not respect a streak. She wants a snack, suddenly at 1:32 a.m. by the oven clock. So I make her eggs with hats, which is a black hole in a toast with a poach on top. And we stay up together and I mix us a drink at 2 and then 2 more. Thank you.
Woody, you are up.
All right, thank you. My name's Doug Woodsum. A lot of people call me Woody, and I'm a high school teacher in extremely rural Maine in the special ed department. I'm going to read Gretchen Berg's poem, Social Distancing, because I like list poems, because I like the wit in this poem, and because I wish I'd written it for the most important you in my life. Social distancing. I miss dreading social events, cash, and eavesdropping. I long for bad cologne, pink eye, making nasty asides, and registering the car. I want to whisper, interrupt, and overshare. Tell tourists that 4th Street restaurant is on 4th Street. I yearn for body odor, root canals, switching from zone defense to one-on-one. Jehovah's Witnesses, CPR, and library fines. I miss circling the block, splinters, unsolicited advice, broken escalators, complaining about something else, and you. And my poem is called Memory Care Visiting Window. And the disease alluded to in this poem progressed slowly for the first 2 years and then exponentially for the last 3.5 years. And at the same time, my involvement in the Maine literary and art scene diminished slowly for the first 2 years and exponentially for the last 3.5 years, which is my way of saying that I miss you, my fellow Maine poets and artists. Memory Care Visiting Window. Behind locked windows and doors, an old crone cuddles a doll, while another woman, a stranger, yells fuck and fucking at me. Why? I do not know. The staff lets her rant. Then she upturns a chair and a table. My wife winces. Fumbling with her wheelchair locks, she then struggles with her phone. We talk. The window's cold. Tragedies surround us. Her smile belies years of pain, injury. Something hard, tight, and clenched in me recalls holding her hand, such a simple tonic, the healing of all prior tragedies. And if I could add a postscript, after 161 days, I finally got to hold my wife's hand again, and she hasn't lost her healing touch.
Thank you so much for that. Beautiful.
Hi, my name is Rhea, Côté Robbins, and I'm in Brewer on the Penobscot. So when I got the invitation or the notice to do the poem for the pandemic, I said, wait, what? Because for me, it was kind of a shock, but it's also, I was thinking, how do you write about a pandemic? And then also I had been junk journaling. So I said, well, if I'm junk journaling, then there has to be a poem in there somewhere. The other thing for me, poetry is like looking in someone's underwear drawer. That's how I look at poetry. It's extremely intimate. So the piece of what I wrote, I will let it speak for itself. Ecclesiastes, COVID-19. Then the holidays roll away, taking the trash with it. The emotional detritus. I'm fighting the tide, darkness. The pandemic. Hail to the death wave washing over the world at Maine like some sports event, action in the bleachers. Only this time, the souls are rising to the heavens and we are alone with the holes in the cloth of the universe, harvest of souls contained in the corona, the sun's crown. Like for cancer, nothing stops or ends. The train of living rolls down the tracks and over whatever gets in the way. What profound thing can I say about the runaway train and death's knocks on doors? The stop, the interruptions, the pandemics before, the scourge of the diseases born and the sicknesses toward us all, deigned our due. Not a question, but an answer before any question asked or posed. Not even a right to ask, but our legacy of living dead humanity, our intemperance coming to roost, or the secret society of world destruction counting on their chance to play God now. I'm looking down on the infected infestation eye of a diseased body riding on all four horses at once, come to collect their due. No one escapes the fucking misery. Cut down by Excalibur gone mad, Holy Grail full of poison, the Shroud of Turin, the face of hell, the Bible cut to the section on plagues, apocalypse, and vengeance is mine credo. Every holy book rent, the curtain in the temple on fire, the tombs full, the dead buried where they lay, no Antigone for anyone. A poem to celebrate the giddy, joyous party on Reaper, the crevices opening at every step where one may trip and fall. Live in spite of, surrounded by deaths or diseases, disabled, distended. Smile no matter what into the face of our personal impending horrors, our platitudes of paean to pandemic. Praises, sun, and elegy to the corona COVID. Cross-cutting the veld with vermin already present, woken and smites the land and all on it with firebombs of retribution for humanity. Just because humanity is here. It needs to be smited, smitten, smote, and exercise in verbiation. Who speaks the final words? My choice to read is Carol Bach-Offner's poem Virus. And I chose it because of its, what I see it as a jewel in the crown, in itself, in its iteration, and also how it makes you rethink the virus. Beautiful. Crowns on spheres glistening with sticky gems. Everyone wants to be a princess or a king, diadems sparkling like the sun. There is death in such beauty, courts full of the vulnerable with little to do for them. The jester laughs, says it's a joke. Such beauty in the scythe. What is the official gem for death? Tiger's eye? Blood ruby? Crown on spheres, vultures on televisions anointing themselves? Parades of followers go by, fools on errands for the king. In the streets and on the shores, laughter rings church bells.
My name is Doug Rawlings. I live in Chesterville, Maine. I'm going to read first I'll read my poem and then I'll read my choice. My poem is entitled Body Count. And during this pandemic, I am thrown back 50 years to the Vietnam War, when we also used to watch the television for numbers popping up, how many dead, how many wounded that day, that week. And as a Vietnam veteran myself, I've walked by the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. many times past those names. And it's so difficult to hold on to names and people when we're being transformed into numbers. So that kind of started this notion of this poem entitled Body Count. Was it just 50 years ago when our mighty military minds had to recalculate how they thought we might win an unwinnable war? Forget centuries of military history when victory, such as it was measured in terms of real estate won and lost and won and lost again and again. Not us. We are one of a kind, exceptional. So we came up with this calculus. If we kill more of them than they of us, we win. The body count was born. And then it slept for a while as the drones took over. No reason to drag out body bags for our troops. Victory by our new definition was preordained until Gaia went viral on us. The planet wants its due. Morning news. How many have died in the night? How old are they? How white are they? Who's next? Who's expendable? Who's running the triage? The body count has been reborn. Who's winning now? I chose the poem to read, One Endless Night by Kevin Sweeney. And I have to say I was struck by the opening line he uses from the singer Jesse Winchester, because I was a fan of Jesse Winchester's and I loved his music. And what I love about this poem is it sort of takes you down to what could be like almost a superficial rundown names of artists, but then it dives deep. At least it did for me. I really love this poem. One Endless Night. It starts with the Jesse Winchester lyrics from Defying Gravity. I will not sing it for you. I live on a big round ball. I never do dream I may fall. Jesse Winchester. One Endless Night. 2020, Kobe Bryant hit a wall and Alex Trebek left unanswered questions. Neither had the virus, but thanks to yesterday, the girl who played Mary Ann, now 82, died too. I go to work every day in my underwear and never drive home when the day ends. I log onto Our World in Data on New Year's Eve and learn the United States death count has passed 300,000. An anthology of virus poems arrives, and the New York Times critic says it isn't very good. Too many poems about trees. The clueless are still maskless, defying gravity. The black and brown are mostly defenseless. Jerry Falwell said 9/11 was God telling us abortion and homosexuality are wrong. What's God angry about now? Children in cages? 74 million votes for Satan's boy? White trash who won't let Jews take their jobs and own this big round ball where almost everyone needs more than $600? I'm glad Jimmy Dale Gilmore is still alive. Sad Jesse Winchester has jumped off, but thanks to Jimmy Dale, Jimmy Buffett, Emmylou Harris, and Waylon Jennings, Jesse still smiles back when there's nothing to smile about.
Thank you so much. I must say, I love the choices you made. It seems to me that these pairings, the poems, it gives the poems a chance to speak to one another. And it's as though those other poets were here with us. Well, some of them are, but in these little squares. So I'm going to read my poem, which I wrote in December because we were moving books around. And you know how during this whole ordeal, we found tasks to keep us busy in our homes, many of us. And my husband and I are retired. So, I mean, we were already at home. But so this revolves around a task that we were doing. In a comfortable tempo, 2020. You explained the Italian word, comodo, a musical direction. But I think it's just how we live these days. We don't talk about the tsunami of sorrow, insomnia, and ennui. Don't talk about our chances or our guilt as others are dying or losing. We focus instead on the near at hand, the comfortable. Like yesterday when we decided to reorganize our books, since the bookshelves had to be moved for painting. We're almost happy as we sit on the side by side on the floor of our unseasonably warm 3-season porch, piling up our Whitman and Bishop, Wharton and Faulkner, my old Virgil, your Italian texts, all tiny rectangles of light opening in a time of closing. The way meeting you changed everything for me. And isn't it grace to accept whatever comes, like Aeneas, who left Troy when ordered by the gods, his ruined home growing smaller and smaller as he headed toward Rome. The way I've watched one home recede from the plain window as I lifted towards something new. When we finish our sorting, you leaf through your Italian dictionary. I'm thinking of the house we'd like to rent in Italy. As we move the bookcases to interior spaces, which changes the landscape of our lockdown. These small rooms opening now toward vineyards and villas, sun-warmed basil on an Umbrian hill. Umbria from ombra means shadow, and umber, the iron tint of earth. And I knew almost instantly the poem I would read. I love all of these poems, no question. And I spent a lot of time with them. But this particular poem written by Alice Persons, who is a good friend of mine and publisher at Moon Pie Press, wrote this poem, which for me personifies, exemplifies the things that we miss, because what she's missing here is something you wouldn't think anyone would miss. It's a lot of noise, right? So this is called Pandemic Fallout by Alice Persons. A block from my house every August for 34 years, the award-winning high school marching band started practicing 6 days a week in the big hot parking lot. On a ladder, the director patiently called out instructions. The kids hoisted the tubas, pounded the drums, marched in patterns. Music swirled through the neighborhood, more melodic and confident as football season got closer. There's no band practice this year. No loud groups of teenagers trooping past my windows to and from school. I don't miss picking up their careless trash or the remarkable number of F-bombs they declaim as they strut by at 7 a.m. I miss the cacophony and then recognizable fragments of songs as lights drain out of the sky over the parking lot, and they march on doggedly, getting better, learning to put all the pieces together. I think another reason I love this poem so much is because I taught high school for 34 years, and you know, you love teenagers, you just do, or I do. Well, thank you, everyone. I think now we're going to have Gracie come back. Gracie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here out of the Zoom ether. And we have a few questions. If they're directed at someone, anyone can feel free to chime in as well. I think it's just based on the poem that was just read. But I will start with a general question that anyone can speak to. Maybe this is a personal misconception, but I feel that writing poetry takes more energy than fiction. Where do you find the creative energy in this quarantine world?
Was that directed at anyone in particular? Could you repeat just the last part of it?
Of course. Where do you find creative energy in a pandemic world, if that differs at all from a non-pandemic world? I know writers get a little, you know, they understand the alone time. I'll put it like that.
I can speak to that a little bit. I don't really find the energy. I have 11 and 13-year-old who are at home, and I just don't really have the space. But I was thinking about this tonight as I was looking through the anthology. I noticed a lot of sonnets are in there. Jeri, did you find that with editing them? A lot of sonnets or very close to sonnet length poems. So I think if you can find like a little nugget of energy, I had to take a poem that already is capable of being a short, small kind of thing and be concentrated, that a sonnet for me is even more concentrated. And I found that even though I wasn't finding big spaces of time to be working, that I was gravitating towards form. I'm usually a free verse writer. So I found that the form for me is a good way in to kind of accessing that energy and forcing that, forcing the craft to happen, to have a kind of endpoint and expectation of what the shape of the poem would be. I found that really helpful. So maybe others would as well.
I can respond. So I find writing in community with others to be really invigorating and energizing. About a year ago, about a year ago, a friend suggested that a group of us start sharing poetry. Whenever we felt compelled to do so, and seeing other people's writing also inspires me to write. Otherwise, I'm just like, well, I mean, I kind of can just be stuck in my own kind of head or space writing. And so I find that to be really invigorating and really energizing. I've never written a novel before. I mean, I've written other things like that are longer pieces that require like kind of like a prolonged kind of attention to it, articles and things like that. And I find poetry to be just much more, I don't know, economical, because you can just kind of like, you have something in your head, some little refrain, and you jot it down, and you can wash the dishes, make the dinner, whatever, it comes, and the next part comes to you. I don't know what I would do if I had to sit down. Well, I've had to write like large things, and I find it just to be much more tedious than writing a poem, honestly. But
okay, we have two more questions, so I'll move forward here. This one is for Myron, but again, if anybody wants to jump in, do you find that unrest, no rest, and stillness are opposites, or that they coexist and are almost complements?
Wow, that's a really great question. I think that they can be very similar. I think unrest is something that is often necessary. I think stillness is something that is often necessary. No rest is one needs rest. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's slight differences, but I do believe that they all sort of speak to this idea of, I think, contemplation, which can have this both a kind of unrest and sort of stillness to them, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Okay.
Myron, that sounds like a Miles Davis song. I was so impressed that you made reference to Miles Davis and his drummer in your poem. One of my favorite. But his idea of, his music is that sort of unrest, that sort of, I don't know, obviously jazzy way of looking at the world. So yeah, I think you nailed it.
All right, we have one last question. It's directed at Rhea, but again, if anyone wants to chime in. Rhea, you talked about how personal poetry is. It's probably pretty safe to say that we haven't had a situation like the past year, or quite exactly like the past year in living memory. How did this time affect your writing, your access to vulnerability, or even your view of poetry?
I said that was an excellent question because it's has a lot of facets to it. I guess for me, the way I look at writing or what I'm doing with writing, one, I journal every day, so I call it doing my scales. And inevitably, I always write past what I know. So I do a lot of the way that I was taught was as a visual artist to set up an artistic problem and then go forward with that. I taught in minimum security prison. I taught women and ran women's group in the prison at Charleston Correctionals. And my journaling, which is something I've done since 1980. So I started my 219th journal this week. And so the thing I would tell the women in the prison is like, there's other things you can be addicted to besides drug and alcohol, so that the writing was a way of problem solving. And when I taught at Bangor Mental Health, which is now Dorothea Dix, there is research that says when you write that there is a change that happens in your brain. And so for me, I think about poetry, how I understand poetry is the way that I trained to become a writer, because poetry teaches you how to see. And so when you really, really need to look at something, I think a poem is the way to do that, because you have an economy of words that is required with a poem. And so, and I think once you start out as a poet, it's really hard not to sound like a poet, even when you write prose. So for me, I guess the writing is an addiction, I'll confess. So if I don't write, you do not want to talk to me that day. That's how bad it is. So it's like a runner, that has the chemical high, that's what happens. So, but I really do feel poetry is like looking in someone's underwear drawer. It is so intimate. It is so close to that person. And to me, it's like their face, their fingerprints, their handwriting. It just, and because people have a litany too, they have these words that are theirs, they own. There are these personal words. And if you look at your work, you'll see that a lot. But I love the question, so thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's it, unless anyone wants to add anything. No? All right, then we will conclude tonight's evening of poetry. Thank you all so much. This was a fantastic way to end the weekend, start the weekend. I'm all turned around. And as I said, we have plenty of copies of Wait. Please feel free to click on over to print and pick them up. And yeah, have a great night, everyone. And thank you again to all of our poets.
Thank you, Gracie.
Gracie.